And we've got Chris. I think that might count as a quorum.
Cool.
Okay, let's get started. We could even start recording if you want.
Ashley did, looks
Ashley
like.
did. So, okay, there it is. Welcome everyone to the July Cloud Foundry Community Advisory Board meeting. It's going to be a short one, I think, but we'll cover some updates as we always do. I posted a link to the CAB agenda in the chat. It's the normal Google Doc link that that rolls up all the notes from all of the meetings. So for July 15th, I want to kick it off with Cff Highlights and Updates, and I want to extend a warm welcome to our new developer evangelists. I don't know if I've got the title right. Shedrack Akintayo, I hope I've got that pronunciation right, and Ram. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ram?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Troy. Hello, everyone. I have been doing some fun stuff around DevOps folks, particularly with a performance monitoring tool and with OpenShift in the past couple of years. So conversations with Chip led to this opportunity where the idea is to sort of spread the cheer among people who are not just enterprise developers and people who are not just in like companies that have over 1,000 employees. So I think the idea is to focus on Cloud Foundry for smaller teams and Cloud Foundry for startups and things like that. Yeah, I have some background in teaching computer science at college and in being a software engineer for a few years in different places around the world. So hopefully I'm able to bring all of that cheer and experience into the efforts here.
Cool. Whereabouts are you based?
Right now I'm based out of India. So yeah.
So the time is really
yeah. So this
time zone is difficult.
Yeah, this is my post-dinner Netflix time. So
okay. Sorry,
we're to give that up once in a while.
And when did you start with the foundation?
Just a week ago.
Okay. Well, welcome aboard. More the merrier, always. I'm really excited to hear that smaller organizations are going to be a focus for Cloud Foundry's evangelism efforts. I've always long felt that small footprint Cloud Foundry was something we should pursue, and that it shouldn't just be for the big teams, that anyone can use this platform. So it's one of my favorite use cases to put it in a smaller organization and help that organization grow. So I'm really glad that's part of a focus that we've got, and hopefully we'll have Shedrack available for the next call. Yeah, I don't think he can make it today, but
yeah,
we'll welcome him as well, and we'll get a little bit of info on him and what his focus areas are. And yeah, so good to have you here.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Clark, do you have any CFF highlights you'd like to share with us?
I don't. I woke up 4 minutes ago and don't have anything off the top of my head. I was also off all last week. Ram, nice to meet you, actually. I also work at the foundation. I was on vacation last week, so wasn't here when you joined, but I'll reach out sometime this week and we can chat.
Sure, Chris, thank you.
Yeah. So no, I don't have anything off the top of my head, actually.
Summit happened.
Summit
right?
happened.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun, I thought. All in all, went pretty well for our first virtual summit. We had our foundation had our quarterly unconference yesterday, so we chatted about that in depth, and we starting to think about what the next one might look like. Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have any dates yet for.
No, we don't have. We didn't pick any dates yet. Probably in a couple of weeks. A majority of the talks are now on YouTube. So you can find all of those for those that couldn't make it, or for those who didn't catch all of the talks. You can watch them freely now on YouTube. So that's cool. Yeah, that's kind of all I've got though.
Cool. Well, on the CFF front, I just saw that Shedrack has joined. So Shedrack, do you want to introduce yourself to the? Hi, I'm Troy. I'm from SUSE. I, for lack of a better person to do it, I'm running the the advisory board meetings. And this is our crew today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you're doing with Cloud Foundry Foundation. Oh,
Your software muted.
Sorry. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
yeah, we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. So my name is Shedrack Akintayo, and I recently joined Cloud Foundry Foundation as a developer advocate. So I'm currently involved in the community side of things, and also getting up to speed with the community with the Cloud Foundry project. So that's kind of mostly what I do currently. So it's nice to meet everybody here. Hi, Troy. Nice to meet everybody here.
Cool. And Ram, your counterpart, was on earlier, and he gave a little introduction to himself. One thing I like to ask, just so we know time zones, whereabouts are you based? Where do you live?
I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria.
Cool. So thanks for joining at this, I guess, later time. This is probably the same as Central European time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Welcome aboard. How have you found Cloud Foundry so far? I saw some of your earlier tweets that you're just finding your footing with Cloud Foundry and learning about it as you go. What are your initial thoughts? Anything to share? Things we should know?
Yeah, I think personally, it's been smooth for me. I mean, coming from background where I'm a front-end engineer, it was quite easy for me to break into the cloud native technology sector. So it was really easy for me, and so far my learning has been quite fruitful. I mean, I've been able to maybe do a couple of things, and I'm looking forward to learning more and also sharing my knowledge basically.
Cool. No, I'll be sure to sync with you later, but very warm welcome aboard to the foundation and to the community.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Shadrach.
All right, thank you, Clark and Chris. Sorry.
Okay, I see there's a lot of excellent PMC highlights and updates. So I'd love to hand it over, I guess, to Eric to go over them.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Troy. Yeah, I thought I'd just do a quick rundown of some of the project updates within the App Runtime Bmc. I think the biggest news is that the CLI team finally released the first GA of the V7 CLI. So that's great news. I know that was imminent in our last call, and we had a lot of discussion about that at Summit. So again, congratulations to them. And two main integration projects are continuing to move forward. Relevant released another minor version of CF for K8s. That's now integrating the Paketo build pack work that the CAPI team was doing. It's also integrating the route CRD work that the networking team has been doing over the past few months. And they're also now focused on doing more careful management of the secrets that CF for K8s is incorporating, and they're starting to use Quark Secret for that to do the auto generation. Yeah, so it's great cross collaboration across the CF projects there. And then some updates from kubecf. I know they've been refining some of the multi-cluster Diego cell configurations that they were exploring previously. And Vlad had also mentioned that they're working on some smoother integration of alternative stacks for Irene. For some of the component teams, CAPI is, now that they've done that decomposition of the monolithic KPack builder into the custom builder with a separate stack and stored build packs, they're working on getting the automatic rollout of stack updates in that KPack set of resources to application instances. And let's see, I know some things that networking is working on. they're working on getting more deliberate reporting of access logs associated to a route into app log streams. And they've also been doing some things to tighten down the system component network security in Cf fricates. I know Irene's still working on application tasks. I think there's, it looks like they're nearly at the end of that. Jules should be coming back this week, and it looks like he's got a fair amount of acceptance to clear out as his welcome back present from paternity leave. They're also continuing to work on some more internal CRD representations of the resources that are in the Irene API. So as moving deeper into the Kubernetes API machinery for their workflows. A couple other highlights. UAA now has Prometheus available metrics exposed on its Kate deployments artifacts. So they've incorporated the statsd exporter to translate the statsd metrics they were emitting previously, and then they've put the annotations on so Prometheus can scrape those in a Kubernetes environment. And logging in metrics, I know they mentioned they're resolving a few of issues they've seen in Cf deployment 13 around the syslog agent. And then they're also starting to explore whether it would make sense for them to be able to use some of the metadata that CAPI has been exposing in the API, so labels and annotations, to translate into annotations that would make their way onto log messages for applications. So certainly if you have any thoughts about that, I'm sure they'd appreciate feedback. Anyway, that's I think about it for the App Runtime Bmc over the last month. I don't know if we have any BOSH or extensions highlights to mention.
I didn't get my extension highlights together, so I would be the person to provide that. So I'm going to have to go back and fill in the blanks later. Stratos continues apace. That's actually the most active project in extensions in terms of commit volume and change. So I don't have an update there other than I think we had a point release of Stratos. If you don't mind, Eric, I wouldn't mind going back and talking about, first of all, briefly, when does Jules get back from parental leave?
I had heard he might be back this week. We'll see.
And of course, Dr. Jules, head of the Irene project, is now a proud father of a daughter named Zoe, which is congratulations to him. Very happy for him. And we need him back, but we also need him to enjoy that time as well. Susan might be able to. Looks like we're able to contribute someone to that team, but we'll talk with the members of that team about that. I wanted to go back to the a discussion that happened about the V7 CLI, specifically about the fact that there is not in the release announcement and the notes about it. It looked like there was zero overlap between supported versions of CAPI. So a release would come out, everything up to a certain release, and I can't remember which one it was V6 is supported, and then the next one, only V7 is supported. That scared some people. And Steve Greenberg and I chatted with the CLI team to get a little bit more clarification about that. And it's really about the API endpoints which are supported. So as long as the V2 API endpoint is still exposed by Cloud Foundry and by CAPI, it's not going to break with so you can actually use the V6 client until the V2 endpoint is removed. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, that sounds right to me, that there's some decoupling there between the Cloud Controller API versions and those CLI versions.
Yeah.
And so since the V2 APIs are on a separate deprecation and removal schedule, then older CLIs will continue to interoperate with those.
Yeah, and that was comforting to hear that because the language in the release notes was a little alarming to some of us who thought, well, how, we're going to have to plan a migration where everybody, and all of our build pipelines and everything are going to have to shift from V6 to V7 when we upgrade Cloud Foundry to the next CF deployment. that's not strictly the case. It's the wording of the release. So we'll talk about maybe expanding that a little bit to describe that there's going to be some overlap there, because that worried some of us.
Yeah, that definitely sounds confusing. I think it certainly makes sense to provide a little more clarity on the compatibility between CLI versions and CF server-side versions.
Now I just see Norm joined us from Stark and Wayne. Welcome, Norm. And since we're on the topic of V3 API and the CF7 client, something that we talked about during the summit when it hit us in a lab was the higher load put on the cloud controller, because a certain amount of processing is happening now server side rather than client side.
Right.
Norm, could you just talk a little bit about the concern there and what you've observed?
What I observed is that the when you're doing the individual calls, because I do so many extra calls back to the back end, I see that the operation of basic calls like CF apps running about 2 to 3 times slower than the CF CLI for version 6. What's interesting to me is when you use the CF curl command, that doesn't exist at all. I don't see the slowdown. I mean, it makes a major difference. One of the things I saw that was in the channel of the CF CLI people is they were reworking how they're doing some of the logging in, and it looks like they're going to, in version 1.8, change how they do things, so more things will be cached on the client side, which should resolve that issue of that slowness. But they're not planning to put that out until 1.8 timeframe.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. But it reinforces the message that we should be performance testing this stuff to spot things like this.
I reported it back 6 to 8 months ago, but because they were so underwater, they didn't want to look at that issue at all, and say they actually took my issue and closed it. Says we're not going to resolve this right here. So,
okay.
And so just leaving it open and say this is going to be resolved sometime in the future when they look at it. But I gave them timing estimates and everything else along with it to show why is this true.
Thanks for doing that.
It's Stefan speaking from SAP. We have done same observations and also reported that to the CAPI team. So in one particular setup with the CF7 CLI and some beta versions, we observed some performance degradations from about 5 minutes with CF6 in a space with lots of applications. I think it was 70 applications or something like that, which is rather big, okay. And it took 2 hours and 10 minutes with, And that's why we said, okay, this is something we cannot, we don't have to talk about that. And we reported it back and there were improvements. So we don't have yet the CF 13.5 in our big landscapes due to some other reasons. So we cannot do this comparison with the GA version. And we got some feedback that there are improvements, but I think it's a long way to go until this one gets usable.
Stefan, what I noticed when was happening was they actually build a full setup up front, while V6 was actually doing paging, pulling in the data as needed. So So even though it took you 5 minutes in the old one because you were doing page by page by page and it restricted the request, on the CF CLI, it would do the full request and get all the data and then page it out. So the time to get all that data was because it was doing full table scans instead of index scans. It was a great deal slower what was going on there. I also reported that issue to them as well. I don't know what the outcome of that one was.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure there will be more. So once we have our landscape updated, we will also do some performance investigations, and there will be lots of feedback. I'm afraid, but anyway, yeah, that has to be addressed. And then, if we look into the specific cases, I'm sure that this can be improved quite a lot. I mean, there were some ideas with in the V2 API, you have the possibility with summary endpoints and with includes, especially on the app object and similar stuff. There are probably some gaps in the V3 API still. There are some includes, but it's not yet so elaborated as it was in the V2. But yeah. I guess that can be improved. That's not something out of the. Another point regarding the version that I want to bring. I tested actually the GA version against our landscapes, which are not yet on 13.5. So it's supposed not to work. Unfortunately, well, there's an error message missing that explains you why it doesn't work. So that's also something that would be worth just to print out. Okay, this CF version is obviously too old, and what you get is you get a feedback that a certain endpoint is simply not implemented, or that a parameter was missing on CF ups. I think that's also something which can help to make it a little bit nicer for the users.
One other error that I'll call it error. It's just one of those bumps in the road that I've seen is if you attempt to use a v7 CLI against a v6 CLI and paging is involved, because the paging parameter names have changed, they will error out saying it can't find its, the v7 stuff will error out saying it can't find its parameters, page size. Well, let's say it's pages instead of page size, different words. And you could at least it tells you what's going on. If you recognize what the API is actually doing, you could realize that what's going on. It was something that 2 or 3 people ran into when they were trying to do the beta release of the CF CLI, and I was able to point them in the right direction. You got to use the right API call. My only concern is they're trying to. I wish they would continue updating the CLI for version 6, because until everything moves over to version 7, you got to support both, and they're not doing that at this point. They're trying to avoid doing any updates to the version 6 stuff, and I think that's also an issue, because at least for the next 6 months, I think we're in a funny transition period, and I think they need to support both, not just one.
This is why it's good to have this discussion here with Eric here, but also we did get a little bit of clarity from the CLI team that they, for an urgent security issue with v6, they would go ahead and patch that. So I think with this feedback that we're getting, that I'm very excited about having CF7. I like that we got the v3 API, but it's got some teething problems, and we're going to need a bit of overlap there. I think is the consensus from people who are testing this at scale, that we're going to need that v2 API endpoint to stick around for a while. I know, for instance, kubecf is just going to be, because CAPS, the tests are going to move over to CF7 soon. And so we're bumping, kubecf is not yet on the version which works with CF7. So we're going to have to bump that and change the tests over. And so we'll be able to contribute metrics on the performance of API calls as well.
Are there already any plans about the deprecation period for v2 API? So will there be announcement soon, just to get an idea when the deprecation starts and how long it takes until then it's not supported anymore in CF?
I think there's been some previous announcements about deprecation schedules, but as far as I understand it, the v3 acceleration team is still working through a lot of the transitions and replacements of v2 endpoints to v3. And so we're not even at a point right now where we could say, okay, we're starting that deprecation window for the entirety of the v2 API. So I think that's they've still got that to complete, and then we definitely want to have long enough transition periods away from those old endpoints, even once they're done.
So CF7 is actually calling a number of v2 endpoints for those. Okay. I'm glad we had this little talk. It's almost good that we have time in this call because we didn't get the presentations. So we had that chat, and because I don't have some extensions updates really to share, we do have a discussion point, unless somebody wants to.
I want to congratulate Suse for buying Rancher.
I'd like to too, but I can say absolutely nothing about it. Of course, there's all sorts of antitrust things, and so I have to wait for a while before I can really talk about that at all.
At least it's been announced. So
it's been announced, and that was a surprise to me.
Okay.
So yeah, it's fun. We're going to have some potentially have some people from that that team or that community that would come and participate here. I hope some really smart people that would have a lot to contribute to this community as well. We do have a proposal that's out there on CF Dev that Yui wanted to talk about, and I want to support. This is the proposal to change the default branch names of Cloud Foundry projects from master to main, as I think the front runner at this point. Yui, do you want to talk a little bit about what you posted?
Yeah, I posted that. I'm hoping we can get to the point where all the PMCs have bought in and agreed to make this particular change. I think since then, I've noticed a number of other foundations are also adopting policies around other language and preferring terms like allow and deny and things like that over blacklist, whitelist. So I think that that's worth considering some of those terms. I believe in the networking area, for example, Shannon has long, where you would expect the term like blacklist or whitelist. Shannon has like worked to avoid that. So I don't actually know that we have too many instances of those terms in Cloud Foundry, but I think it's worth having all of the PMCs considering auditing the language that we choose to use.
And I've shared it with the extensions PMC, recommending that at their easiest convenience. I don't want to introduce a lot of mandatory churn, but at their earliest convenience to make that change. Certainly Stratos is on board. I know from my CubeCF contacts that they're on board with this. It's just, pipelines have to change. Stuff has to change, so it might be a while. I haven't seen any objections in principle to this. It's mostly just, it's going to take time to figure out when to do it and how to do it. I would say to the community, if anyone has a particular issue with this, or if you don't feel comfortable talking about it in the wider group, and it's like you have an objection or a concern, or you have a particular favorite branch name that you'd like to change to, and you don't feel comfortable, you can approach myself and Yui, maybe you as well, directly on Slack to raise those concerns, because it's a sensitive issue for some people, and you don't want to get batted down for expressing an opinion. So feel free to contact myself or Yui, and we can talk through it.
I believe Eric is putting together a proposal for the Runtime PMC.
Yeah, that's on my plate. We had discussed it with the attendees at the App Runtime PMC meeting last week, and people were generally supportive of both the branch renaming. We may settle on some different patterns as is appropriate for the development lifecycle. I know some repos are already doing a develop and then release promotion branch workflow anyway, and so it may just be that more stable release branch gets renamed to something other than master. And we also discussed the renaming what few exclusionary language BOSH release properties exist, but also doing so in a way that doesn't introduce breaking changes unintentionally to those interfaces. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That change is good, but it's really nice if the change doesn't break things.
Yeah, I don't think that there are many instances of those at all across the App Runtime PMC releases, in part because we've already been sensitive to not introducing that language from the start.
Cool. Is there a list of all the different terms that you're looking to change?
I think things around like whitelist and blacklist, those are the most likely candidates that would actually show up in BOSH releases.
Okay.
Be probably good to just take a pass over all of those properties to see if there's anything else that stands out.
I'm just curious if people are looking at the word server or service and stuff like that.
Oh, that's deep. That would be fairly.
I'm just asking the question. I just don't know because I don't know what is
I mean,
the level.
Yeah, I don't, and I hadn't heard that as an objection before. I think to me, that's a very neutral term, but it's not always up to us, right? Like, so.
Right, exactly.
Um,
That's why I was curious, what terms are you going after, and then.
Well, the first one was master as the default branch. That
Yeah.
was the original proposal. There has been work, generally speaking, to avoid blacklist, whitelist as terminology that's exclusionary or.
And I'm assuming when you say master, you also mean slave. So.
Yeah, I don't know too outside of databases which are consumed by Cloud Foundry, if that's something we control. I mean, remember, we are going to be consuming a lot of other projects which will have different rule naming conventions. So to the extent, I mean, we wouldn't go, I don't think, to the extent of like forking things from an upstream database to change that terminology. Just things under our purview. That is our responsibility. We would change. So I don't think is there slave terminology anywhere in our code?
In networking, you use it a lot, right? You got the master node and you got your slave nodes. There's a lot of different stuff that people talk about that I think we need to change our terminology.
Yeah, I just don't know where it is in CF.
I can't think of any instances of that terminology, at least within the App Runtime Bmc project.
Okay.
We do inherit it from databases. I know that from some of them, but not in code that we're responsible for. I want to, unless there's any further comments on that, I wanted to open it up for potential free-for-all, items of concern, things we want to talk about, what you had for breakfast today. Do we want to do social time? We have 25 luxurious minutes to share our thoughts on Cloud Foundry. So I'm going to open the floor for questions, comments, etc.
Hi, Troy. I'm actually on the Bosch team now, so I'm just going to make a brief update because I noticed we didn't have someone join the last call. Right. And things are still chugging along. We've been making more quality of life fixes to Bosch, like the logging that goes out while you're actually watching a deploy is now more verbose, so you can see when things are being drained, when things are being processed. We now show things like the hypervisor in the inspections. So, we also, just to chime in on the last topic, we also had the conversation, and we're making the changes in the Bosch team, where we just have to work on the pipelines to change the naming as everyone else. So I decided to chime in, and so the Bosch team is still attending and still happy. Okay,
cool. If you want to add any detail into the agenda doc, becomes basically the meeting minutes. So if you want to jot anything down other than what I wrote there, I'm going to go retroactively and fill in extensions PMC stuff too. So,
okay.
How's Port Alberni?
It's beautiful weather now. Nice and hot, and looking forward to the weekend doing a hike.
Kevin and I are out in British Columbia, so
yeah.
Not far. Well, far, but
yeah. Yeah, we're enjoying small heat waves with intermittent rain, so everything's nice and green out here.
Cool. So, and thanks for contributing the stuff about Bosch. It's good to know that you're on that team for future reference. Anyone? We have lots of CF peeps to talk CF stuff about if you want. Bernd, how's the early experimentation with, or not so early experimentation with CF for Kates going for you?
Yeah, so what can I say? So basically we have a team looking into CF for Kates. So we have been looking also into kubecf recently, for quite some time, and recently we've decided to kind of shift the focus a bit to look into CF for Kates. So we have a team looking into it and also starting to I would say, contribute some first enhancements there. So things like being able to specify an external database was something that the team was actually working on, simply because that's how we kind of traditionally set up our Cloud Foundry system. So I would say moving along quite nicely. Also good to see that like there's this regular cadence of CF for Kate's releases coming out. Yeah, going on so far.
As you mentioned, it was really nice to see CF4K8s adopt Quark secrets as the secret management mechanism, showing that there's good communication happening between those teams. I know a lot of us were concerned. I was very concerned that we would have two parallel and non-interacting branches of Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes development. I think we've normalized that in a way that makes sense. Of course, kubecf's plan is to adopt the components as they mature in CF4K8s. I think UAA is next on their list of things that they're going to pull in from the new Kubernetes idiomatic releases from upstream, and then there's some more major stuff that will have to come in all at once. I think routing is something that has to come in all at once, and the move, of course, to KPAC eventually will be a similar sort of big shift. But otherwise, it's going to be an incremental moving of things.
Yeah, I guess the build packs topic is still so Paketo, kind of comparing that to the existing Mosh-based Cloud Foundry build packs is probably another area that we at least need to look into in more detail.
I think we now have a complete set of Paketo build packs. Is that right? Ruby's in now, so we've got parity for everything. Maybe it doesn't work exactly the same, but
it's not like I believe there's still a bit of a gap. I'm not sure if there's. I think there was one of the standard languages missing, if I'm not mistaken. But like on our end, it's more, I would say, things inside the build pack that have slightly changed for some of the stuff. So one thing that I recall is that I believe there has been a change with bringing in JDBC drivers and how that works compared to the existing build packs. So I guess, yeah, I'm not sure, but I guess compatibility and like a migration path will probably be a topic that, like, after people getting things to run for the very first time, will also kind of take some time to actually figure that out.
I thought about something that we could talk about. I don't know if we've got anyone from OSB API on the call, but I've noticed that the cloud providers are deprecating or end-of-lifing OSB API brokers for their platforms. Most recently, Azure has stopped supporting their OSB API broker. And it's something that is a bit of a concern. I understand the move for cloud. I understand the motivation for cloud providers to expose their own operator for controlling service provisioning. That seems to be a model that's popular in Kubernetes. I get that. Unfortunately, this means that every cloud provider or every service provider will expose its own operator and its own CRDs. And there will be no common functions for platforms to plug into. This is going to, if this trend continues, which once you have the three cloud providers off of OSBAPI, that's a significant move. It introduces more complexity because we previously had a single interface that we could agree upon. When we want to ask for a service in Cloud Foundry, this is what we call. We call OSBAPI. OSBAPI's broker implementation will call whatever it needs to call to provision a service and return connection credentials. We now have to have a broker between the operator and Cloud Foundry. SUSE is doing some work on this, related sort of speculative work based on our mini broker that's in the Kubernetes SIGs. But I think it's something we could keep an eye on. Maybe I'll get Tulio Assis or somebody from SUSE, or maybe convince somebody from the OSBAPI team to talk about it in the next community advisory board, because I think it's an important thing. It's an underrated method for connecting platforms to services. It works very well. It just it sort of got overshadowed by people talking about service mesh and talking about operators. And they sort of, I think people are forgetting the core utility of OSBAPI. I think as a community, we got to remind people how useful it is. Any thoughts on that? Wayne's awfully quiet. Okay. If anyone else has anything, speak now. Otherwise, I guess, Ashley, we could stop recording.